Hello and welcome to Level Up Your Genealogy 3, Refining Skills. My name is Jen Schaefer, also known as the Formidable Genealogist. We have 4 different sections for this class. The first one is how to train your brain to see the details and see what is actually relevant to your research. Then we're going to go through some practical tips for better researching on different sites and being more efficient and more intentional in your research. Then we're going to go through how to find different types of U.S. military records. And lastly, we will focus on finding records beyond the U.S. The first section is all about how to train your brain to see what is going to be relevant to your research. You need to figure out what you should be critical of. Maybe something is not a real fact. Maybe it's a so-called fact. What is the source of the information? Let's evaluate all the details we find and put them into historical context that will help you have a broader understanding of what research you're doing. Maybe you're missing something on records. Maybe it seems kind of like an insignificant detail to you, but if you pay more attention to it, it might completely open up your research. Maybe you are misinterpreting something on records. So let's figure out the best method for you to retain all of these details and then see the bigger picture in your research. Maybe you need to put things in a spreadsheet so you can attack all of the facts at once and see a huge overview of the family. Maybe you're like me and you just cram all of the information into your head like you are cramming for a history quiz in high school. Maybe you need to make a flow chart. But let's figure out some of the different ways where we can train your brain to be a more efficient and more thorough researcher. If I could go back in time and get myself to create one habit in research, it would be to immediately check the Family Search Wiki before I research any new place or any type of record or any new subject. If you're not familiar with the Family Search Wiki, it's kind of like Wikipedia, but it's for all things related to family history, and it is through the Family Search Library, through familysearch.org. It's entirely free to use, and it will have information and links to every subject you can think of having to do with genealogy. Now, it's important to know that not everybody can change things on this site. Not like with regular Wikipedia where people can just edit things. You have to be carefully vetted and pass a test by Family Search in order to change things on this site. So it's pretty reliable information. It's going to have, like, if you search on a person or on a place, you're going to have a history of the area, plus links to the different paid and free sites, and then details on the collections. For US-based research, I recommend you always start with county and state. The easiest way to find any subject on the Family Search Wiki is to just Google it. So I would just Google like Family Search Wiki, Hennepin County, Minnesota, and it's going to take you straight to that site. Or maybe you're looking for military records. You can just Google exactly that. Or maybe records in Sicily, maybe Polish online genealogy, all these different topics, and that's going to be your best bet when you are researching any new location. You can also access the Family Search Wiki from anywhere on familysearch.org. You would just need a free username and password to use any part of Family Search. It's always 100% free. So you can go on the search menu, then hit the Research Wiki, and then you can type in a different place or a topic or reading aids or genealogy word lists. There are just loads and loads of different websites that will help you. When I am researching in another country that I'm not familiar with, I always start here because you don't really know the structure of the country. You don't know the different jurisdictions. You don't know the availability of records. There are some countries where I go to research, like Belarus comes to mind. And you go to like the Belarus online genealogy page, and there's hardly anything there. Here with Czechia, we have a lot of different options, and it's going to show you different types of records on the right side, and you can link directly to that. Different areas where you can start research for Czechia, some background on the history, Just loads of information, especially on regional archives. This is the best way to find non-English sources or anything that you wouldn't ordinarily know how to find on your own. If you click on Czechia Online Genealogy Records, it's going to give you a categorized listing, the different types of online genealogy records, and then links directly to them. Free and paid resources like Family Search, Find My Past, Ancestry, then a new one I've never even heard of, Stone Picks. So all these things that you wouldn't ordinarily know off the top of your head because you don't know what you don't know. This can save you hours of searching because there's just no way to know everything about a subject, and here it is all in one easy and free place. Here is an example of a county page for US-based research. Now this is for Hennepin County, Minnesota, and it's going to give you the organized date so that you know where you would find records if they would be in Hennepin County or in a parent county prior to that. It's going to show you the neighboring counties. It's going to show you the known beginning dates for different types of records. It's going to show you if there's any record loss. That's especially helpful if you are dealing with United States Southern research, where there are a lot of courthouses that had significant record loss. And then on the left side, it's going to show you all of the different categories for records. Mind you, there will not always be clickable links to every type of record that's going to show you if something is definitely available, or it will tell you how to access it. For retraining your brain to be a better researcher, this is a big one. Pay attention to if you have an original copy of a record or if it is another copy of an original record, because people did recopy things to have different versions, hundreds of years later. So always try to determine if it is an original copy or if you need to go looking for that original copy. Because if something has been recopied and a new version created, there's a greater chance for error. So check and see if this is maybe lined like notebook paper, even though it's something from the 1700s, so that wouldn't exist. Or maybe if a record is typed long before a typewriter was invented. The typewriters were invented in the 1870s, but not something that you would really see in old church records or court records because those are bound volumes. Like, look at this example here. At the top, I have Daniel Hall marrying Eliza Thomas in 1856, but this does not look like a record from 1856. So I went searching and I found the original copy of the record where she is listed as Eliza Holmes, not Thomas. They made a mistake when they copied the record. So especially on Family Search, you are more likely to be able to find the original copies of the records. So let's say you are looking for a marriage record for Clinton County in Kentucky, and you are looking for one for 1859, but the record set says it's only from 1884 to 1959. Don't trust those dates. A lot of times they are wrong. You should still look in a record set, even if it doesn't appear that it will have the record you need for the right time. Because here in this set, I did find an 1859 marriage record, even though it claims it doesn't start until 1884. I see this the most on Family Search. Their locations tend to be more accurate than their dates. Sometimes they will be mislabeled, but sometimes I will also find like an 1840 Norwegian document hiding in a church register from like 1900 in a Norwegian Lutheran church in the US. So still look in every record that could potentially have the record you're looking for, even if it doesn't seem like it should fit with the dates. The same marriage record is also a great example of other details that you need to notice. Name spellings. So we'll talk more about standardized spelling elsewhere, but this shows that Noah Guthrie wrote his name like that, but the clerk spelled it differently in the same record. So pay attention to if the handwriting is the same as the signature to know if the individual filled out a form or if a clerk did it. It's especially helpful on marriage documents. And then you can see that William Lee signed his name with an X, so his own name had no true correct spelling because he was not literate and was making his mark. Also, even though spelling wasn't really standardized at this point here in 1859, I would still pay attention to it. It's not going to be like a deal breaker if you find it in a different spelling, but tend to see like Guthrie spelled that way, Guthery, versus Guthrie, Guthrie. If you see that in more records, then perhaps it is the right Guthrie family, just based on that spelling difference. Here's another example of an incorrect date in a record collection. Now this was in Family Search Full Text Search. I was looking for some of these very old 1750 land records, and I sorted on dates for Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And I sorted on 1750s and nothing came up. But I went ahead and sorted on 1957 and I found that 1750 record hiding in those 1957 records. So start filters with the correct dates and then move more broadly to the more incorrect dates. So that's a general tip for all genealogy research. Narrow it down first to specifics and then get broader and broader for more results. Just remember that just because you know something is a fact doesn't mean it was indexed or recorded as such. Like, just because you know this occurred in 1750 doesn't mean that all of the websites got it right and put it down for 1750 rather than 1957. A very common problem I see in research is people are missing a fact that one fact that they are counting on to be accurate shows up in two or more places, but it actually comes from the same single source. I recently had a client case where the client disagreed with my findings because a fact had showed up on Find a Grave and death certificate, even though it was wrong. So they were saying that that is two different sources, so it must be correct. But the info on Find a Grave came from the death certificate. It's not two separate sources. This example here was for Joseph Cuccia, who was murdered in 1906 in Los Angeles. He was a Sicilian immigrant. And I searched high and low for the Mary Artisoni that was listed as his mother's maiden name on his death certificate. But then I thought about it and I'm like, who is Angelo Chiapponi, who's listed as the informant? How does he necessarily know that that is the name of this guy's mother? Is he a reliable informant or not? So I started looking into him some more. He was listed in newspaper accounts as being a boarder with the family. So just because he's living in the household, does he really know the head of household's mother's maiden name? The suspect in the murder is a relative of George Maisano, who was killed by Joe Artisoni. Angelo states in the article that this is a family feud and Joseph Cuccia is Joe Artisoni's cousin. But is Angelo reliable on family relationships if he is just a boarder in the household? These are the things that you need to evaluate to see how reliable the information is and to see if these multiple facts and these multiple sources are actually just one source. If someone's name is translatable, you need to consider all variations, not just their first name, but also last names as well. Even if your ancestor was not an immigrant but lived among immigrants, you may find that their name is also translated. This example is all the same person, but sometimes he was Johann Schwartz and sometimes he was listed as John Black. And names can also fluctuate. My second great grandmother was a Norwegian immigrant named Ingeborg Anna Jensen, but for a while in the early 1900s, she just went by Anna Johnson. So people can change their names and then also change them back as well. One of the things with Ancestry Hints that will probably derail your family tree pretty easily is if you don't stop and critically analyze each and every ancestry hint before you apply it. See if it makes sense for the timeline of an individual, for their life, and for location. Plot things out on a map. And I wish I would have understood to do this when I first started researching. When somebody hires me for a brick wall in their research, it's usually because of applying incorrect hints and not stopping to evaluate each and every one. So if we're looking at this example here, we've got Andrew McGath in Sangamon County, Illinois in 1850 and in 1870. And he also marries Mary Ann Austin in 1862 in that same county. So is that really him in 1860 in Indiana, already married to Mary? I don't think so, but every single tree automatically accepted that hint. So then that keeps perpetuating that false information, and people just assume every tree has it, so it must be correct, because that's how ancestry hints work. If one person accepts a record, then it sends it out to another person that has a similar, nearly identical person in their tree, and it can just keep snowballing from there. Don't get very attached to specific spellings of your family's name because it can go all over the place. People were not asked to spell their own names by census enumerators or most record keepers, so people wrote things the way they heard them. I used to believe that if I saw my McFarland family listed with McFarlane instead of McFarland, that it was a different family. But those are all just, in the eyes of the person who wrote it, how they heard things. Spelling is very fluid in genealogy. Say things out loud. That's going to help you a lot. For instance, here in 1850, we have McGaff. That's the same as McGatt in 1860. Spelling is just interpreted by the person that hears it. So you can look and see that the names and ages for the family match up. It's just the last name is different. So it doesn't really matter how your ancestors spelled their name. It matters more how somebody else recorded it, and you should pay a lot more attention to first names and ages and location. Also, stop and pay attention to which records you might be missing. So like on Ancestry, all records are going to be listed numerically first in order and then alphabetically after that. Look at them and see which records you should have for somebody. Like with my second great grandfather, I know that he came in 1869 from Norway. So I should have an 1870 US Census and also an 1881, and I don't. So try to collect all of those records first. Learn to train your eye to see which records you should reasonably have for a different time and place. Use a Family Search Wiki or Ancestry or the Family Search Catalog to determine which records are available for that time and place in which your person lived, and then collect them all. Also learn to recognize what it means if you find a certain record. Does it mean that there's a counterpart somewhere because I found one record? If I find like a marriage record, does that mean there should also be a marriage intention listed earlier, a marriage bond? If somebody is naturalized, should I be looking earlier for a declaration of intention to become a citizen? If somebody purchases land, should I be looking later for a land sale? Is there a will? Then let's look for those probate records, see what happened to the estate settlement. If minor children are orphaned, are there guardianship records for somebody to take money from the estate to cover all of the expenses for the children? Is there a ship arrival? Is there a ship departure? If somebody was in the military, can you find a pension record for them? When you are looking for birth records, don't get too focused on searching by the child's first name. There are so many birth records that you can find all over the place where somebody is just listed as unnamed. They were allowed to do that. They didn't have to give a name for the child. Also, keep in mind that there was no such thing as a legal name change until pretty recently. So yes, they may name their daughter Bertie on this record, and you may find that later on she went by Clara. You just don't know, so be very open-minded about these names. Don't assume that what we would think of as a nickname is truly a nickname. It might be their actual full name. Don't have the modern view of nickname versus formal name because that's not always true. In the 1870s here in these birth records, I found loads of children where their full name was Fanny. It was not Frances. But yet you would go out to like find a grave and you would see that people would go out and correct the name from Fanny to Frances, even though there's no indication that this person ever used the name Frances. So don't just assume that it should be short for something. And the idea of a father and son with the same name having senior and junior is also a modern practice. Prior to pretty recent times, like the last 100 years, people would have senior or junior after their name just to indicate that one was older and one was younger. So don't assume that if you find somebody listed as junior, that his father was definitely the same name and senior. It just is an age difference. Sometimes they're related, sometimes they're not. Also, be leery of those middle names that you find on Find a Grave that are completely unsourced in a time when few people had them. I would say about 1880 forward, I would expect to find a middle name, but again, not always. My great grandfather was born in 1875 and he did not have a middle name. I find them all over Find a Grave and then just perpetuated across online trees. One person uses Find a Grave to prove that their online tree is correct, and then vice versa. Review actual records to determine if there's any proof that somebody actually had a middle name or used it. So in this example here, there are no records that show that Phineas Bateman Olcott used Junior with his name ever. He only used Phineas B, and one record did confirm his middle name was Bateman. And there are actually 0 records showing that his father used any middle initial or had middle name of any type or even used senior at all. So only use names that have sources to back them up that are not Find a Grave or other trees. I know how exciting it is to find old photos as hints on Ancestry or find some old photos of people on Find a Grave, but try to look at that with a critical eye as well to determine if they are actually accurate and for the person that they are labeled as being. I often see photos on Find a Grave or in trees that are attributed to somebody who died in like 1820, even though photography wasn't invented until the 1830s and then not very accessible until the 1850s. Learn to look what an age a photo might be based on how it looks, like the tintypes in the 1850s, the cabinet cards in the 1860s, and so forth. So this is the same man across 1850s, 60s, and 90s. I like to compare facial features. You can even do, like in Photoshop, you can do like a facial overlay to try to see if the features line up. Yes, they change some with time, but you can typically compare individual features to see if it is the same person. MyHeritage also has a free photo dating tool where you can upload the photo and it's going to give you an approximate date based on hair, clothing, and style. Also try to determine the provenance of a photo. Look in the person's tree that has it. Have they labeled it as being like my great grandfather, or have they said where that they got it from so you can try to determine if it's accurate? Do they have any other notes in their gallery explaining how they know this is the correct person? If not, I would say reach out to them and ask them how they know that it is actually that individual. City directories are one of the most highly underutilized genealogy record sets. I would say that I have cracked like, I don't know, 200 client cases just based on city directories alone. But always open up those hints to make sure that they are correct. So if a woman is listed, it's usually that because she's widowed, unless it's pretty recent times, like, I don't know, past 100 years. I went into this record here and it showed up, and everybody else had applied it to their tree for 1864, but I opened it up and it said widowed. That didn't show up on the index part of the record here, but the actual record image said she's widowed. but the woman I was researching, her husband was alive and well. So this would not be her, and this would be incorrect. Now, if you get some hints on Ancestry for city directories, don't assume that that is all that exists for your individual. It's only going to show up as a hint if it's already attached to another person's tree. So I often hit search on city directories when I'm researching for clients, and I find an additional like 10 or 20 city directory entries for somebody, and they would never show up as a hint, only through searching. So you're missing a lot of data if you are not out searching for every single year of city directories. You can also search on an address. Like if you know here that James Murphy is living at 120 Madison, you can go to the city directories and search just on that address and see who else lives there, because they might not all be Murphys, but they might be relatives. Sometimes these directories will even say where somebody removed to, like it will say James Murphy removed to Ireland, removed to Chicago. That narrows down the year between census dates when somebody moved. The city directory is usually gathered with all the info the year before, so don't assume that, 1872, if somebody is listed as widowed, that their husband definitely died in 1872. It's probably the year prior. I had a client case recently for a James Murphy in New York City in the 1870s, and there were about 50 different James Murphys listed in city directories. So I started mapping them out to see if I could figure out which one was the right one in 1874. Because if somebody's just a laborer, it's a lot harder to track than if they are a mason or a blacksmith or something. So finally, I was able to find that one of the James Murphys was only a 3-minute walk in 1874 from where the other one was in 1872, giving me a really good lead to follow. So even if you're sure that you have the right person in a record, always look for concurrent records to ensure that there's only one person in the right place by that name and that there are no other candidates. So if you save like an 1880 census to your tree on Ancestry, it will never send you another 1880 census hint because you've already told it that you have the record you need. So you might be climbing the wrong family tree if you don't take the time to evaluate all the records available to make sure you have the right person. So I had a client case where every single tree believed that a physician from Tennessee moved to Arkansas 350 miles away in 1880, had a second family, and became a farmer. And that just didn't seem right to me. Everybody else had just assumed that since it was such a unique name as William C. Fain, that it must be the same guy. So I just did a search on the 1880 census, and I was able to see that there were two men of the same age with the same name. So make sure that you are evaluating any other potential candidates so that you are actually following the right family. In the next section, we're going to go through some practical tips for research. One is being open to different dates than when an event actually occurred, because records were not always immediately filed. It did cost money to file probate or land records at the county, and maybe the courthouse was not very accessible. So don't ignore any record that seems too late to be correct. Sometimes you'll even find births or deaths that are filed years after the fact. Especially when minor children were involved in a parent's probate case, keep checking the court records until they reach their majority. Many estate settlements have several packets as well, not just one. I followed a 1794 case out to 1806 and then all the way to 1811 before the estate was finally fully settled. Always remember that Ancestry will continue to try to make it easier for you to copy other trees and make progress as quickly as possible, not necessarily correct progress, just progress. So their goal is kind of entertainment more than like serious academic research, and there's definitely a place for that as well. But if you care more about absolutely correct family trees, always avoid adding these potential ancestor hints. It's going to blind you to other correct records. If you just apply what they're suggesting here, it's going to also give you dates, and then you'll start to find records that match that potential ancestor, and it's going to make you harder to see if something truly is correct or not. It'll start to seem more and more correct as more records show up, even if it's not. Add people as you confirm them. If you have any unconfirmed people added to your tree, I would say put a question mark after their name. Like in this instance, if you want to add those people, I would decline the potential ancestor add and then add in those names just with a question mark, and then do your own research to see if they are possibly correct. Until the advent of Social Security around 1936, there was really no such thing as a legal name with consistent spelling like we view it today. Prior to that, people could spell their names however they wanted or make name changes without going through any kind of legal process. So that whole legal name change thing is a modern idea and simply was not needed. When you are looking for names, consider that basically all vowels are interchangeable when somebody is either writing their own name or writing down a name that they've heard. And that is kind of where some of the misconceptions come in with immigrant name changes, when people assume it was a forced name change because it's different spelling, but really it's just because spelling did not matter. People can change their spelling or their full name anytime they wanted without any legal process, which makes it very tough to track. In this example here is an estate packet from 1794. My fourth great grandfather's brother, Andrew McFarlane, he was extremely intelligent, very educated, and even he spelled his name at least 3 different ways during that time period. So he's spelling McFarlane with an I-N, with an A-N-E, and then one point McFarling, and I even saw him spell it with a PH another time. So don't get attached to spelling. If you are trying to find the true original spelling of your family's name, there really is no such thing because standardized spelling is a recent modern idea. When you are dealing with your ancestor's name being written by somebody else, consider that person that wrote it. What is their background? Maybe there was a common language, making it more likely that they wrote the name correctly, or maybe there was a difference here, like Lawrence from Germany here, Lawrence Seatic and C.E. Ripley, the enumerator, probably did not have a shared language. So could there be some errors here? Probably. Just scroll to the top of a census page and you will see who the enumerator was, and you can kind of evaluate how they might have heard a name. Also consider the language the person spoke who was writing down this information, especially with places like Hamburg, Germany, where somebody maybe came up from Czech Republic to leave for America. They leave through Hamburg, but they first talk to a German person who is doing the recording of the record. So pay attention to that. How would a German write a name? Would they translate the first name? Would they translate the location of where the person was from into the German term for that location? So do a little bit of looking around, especially on family search places, to see if Nemschitz is truly Nemčice in West Bohemia, Czech Republic. And when you are dealing with a name whose origins are in another alphabet, think of all of the possible variations that could exist when a name is transliterated, especially if it's coming from like Cyrillic or Greek or Arabic. This example is Tchaikovsky, and there's only one way to write it in Cyrillic. There are not all these different options. But consider all of these different ways that somebody could have written it in English if somebody immigrated. You can also see why somebody might have changed their name to something like Thompson to make it a lot easier. When researching in newspapers, consider all of the different name variations, especially any type of abbreviation for names. Like for George, you'll find just GEO, John is JNO, etc. I had also researched for a TV show called Relative Secrets a while back, and that was for somebody named Nicholas Carr. And everybody had just searched the newspaper only for Nicholas Carr. They had not considered the variations like Nick Carr, Mr. Carr, Constable Carr, etc. So include occupations or military rank, and then all of these different abbreviations for names and different versions when searching. Would be remiss not to talk a little bit about Family Search full text search and then some tricks for using it. I wrote a full research guide all about how to work with this most amazing tool since the internet began for genealogy. So you want to check that out on my website as well. So if you are unfamiliar with Family Search full text search, here's what it is. Family Search has like 5.3 billion record images that are unindexed. So they've not been put through any type of AI to index and pull out the names or any kind of human indexing either. So the OCR, optical character recognition software, can pull out any word or phrase that is listed on these records in the old handwriting. It's not always perfect, but it is such a game changer. So when you are using it, pay attention to those advanced search tips that they give you. They're going to make it a lot easier to use. One of my favorite tips here is entering a man's exact name in quotes so that it will return that exact phrase in records, and then putting the wife's maiden name in the keyword box. That often leads me straight to her parents, as the husband will often be listed in land dealings or estate settlements or something like that tied to his in-laws. So I prefer to only use names when I first start searching and then narrow down with dates and places after. It makes it for a lot easier searching because you can just change those filters as you go. You can also find a lot of federal records on full text search, but you might not get to them the right way if you don't know this little secret. So it'll include things like Revolutionary War pensions, U.S. passport applications, bounty land for military service, etc. So when you are searching for the person's name, then you filter on United States of America. And then instead of sorting on the state where they lived after that, sort again on United States of America, and that's going to show you those federal records. It's really important in your research to find people living near to each other because chances are that your ancestor found his wife within a 5-mile radius of where he lived. So I recommend searching for the word road out on full text search because now that full text exists, you can search for any keyword, not just names. These county court records for road maintenance can often show you neighbors because people will be listed in the order of where they lived. So I would search for like Joseph White, and then I would put the word road in the keyword box. And then I would search on, Tennessee and then the county that he lived in. And then it's going to show the people that were on the different crews for road maintenance, and you can reconstruct a neighborhood based on that, and then maybe find who his in-laws are. On full text, they are constantly adding more records into their database to search. And I've noticed they have been adding a lot of newspapers under periodicals as well. They've been adding a lot of vital records and a lot of new places. So full text search should be your first stop on Family Search. It's honestly a lot easier to use than their just general name search. So I use this for 99% of my client cases. Now we'll talk a little bit about how to find military records. And again, your first stop should be the Family Search Wiki. There's a link in your handout for how to get to these United States military records that are just all, summarized on here with easy clickable links. This is the most comprehensive list I've found of which types of records exist, how to order them from the National Archives, or links to them online on different websites. It also clearly outlines the record loss, like the 1973 St. Louis fire, for instance, where many World War I and World War II records were lost. Let's talk a little bit about tracking Civil War soldiers. So for example, here I clicked on Civil War from the Family Search Wiki page, and then it gives me links to free and subscription sites with records. The advantage of doing it this way is that you don't know what exists and survives, and this will help set your expectations. Also, these record sets will contain the relevant search fields that you need for making searching a little bit more precise rather than just searching by a general name in any type of regular search. It helps to search specifically and intentionally. We'll see a lot of client trees where there's no logic to Civil War records. They just save all correct named people. Maybe that were, in Indiana, maybe every John Smith who was in the Civil War in Indiana, and they save every single one of those without stopping to evaluate if it's the same person. And then that's going to perpetuate incorrect hints going to others. So make sure you are not merging together the identities of multiple individuals. Pay attention to the company and unit someone served in, and look at the service entry date or the muster in date or muster out date. It should match across all records. Pay attention to residence place and service entry place. If someone's in Illinois, they're not going to go muster in New York. And before trying to obtain additional records for your soldier, try to find this record first with all of these details. These veteran index records often have every bit of information that you need to find additional records. The National Park Service has a free search for Civil War soldiers, both Union and Confederate. There's a link for that in your handout. You just go to this free site and then you enter the person's name. I searched on Andrew McGath. So if you have a common named person, you can narrow it down on the left by battle unit, state, and side. But based on that other document I had, I know that he is not the guy from Indiana, but that the first two are him. So names can be spelled phonetically. Don't get hung up on spelling. If you click on the correct person, it's going to give you additional details that should match what you already have from those other indexed records. Then you can click on the battle unit name for details of service. Then it shows you all the details of the regiment and a full timeline for the regiment's service. You can use the dates that were listed in that other record that you have, the muster in and muster out dates, to compare to these service dates and see exactly where they were and what they experienced. And then from here, you can learn more about individual battles. For any Union Civil War soldier, you'll want to check and see if they have a pension file at the National Archives. There's a link in your handout to order it, and it's cheaper to order it from civilwarrecords.com than ordering it from the National Archives, and it's a lot faster. These can be 100 to 300 pages long as well. They were filed for soldiers, widows, and minor children. It can contain so much information. It can contain medical reports, affidavits from family members that were maybe there at the person's birth. It can contain information about an individual battle. Maybe one of their comrades found them after they were shot on the battlefield. It might have an affidavit from that person with great detail about wounds, great detail about different battles. There is a link in your handout to search for free on Family Search to see if you can find an index card like this for your ancestor. Make sure that the details on the index card match the actual service dates that you have, along with the dates of filing. So like if the widow filed in 1905, but you know that your Andrew McGath was still alive until like 1925, then you'll know this is not the right person. So check the dates and check the location where somebody was living when they filed and also where they served from. You can also get other Washington, D.C. National Archives records from civilwarrecords.com as well, like federal land records, Indian Wars, Spanish-American War, War of 1812, etc. So they do not have Confederate pension records because those are not federal records. Some states did offer Confederate soldiers and a small pension for their service. So this would have been requested locally in the state where they resided, not where they served from. There is a link in the handout for the Family Search wiki page that will give you state-by-state links to those records for any Confederate ancestors. The National Archives partnered with Fold3.com, which is owned by Ancestry, to digitize War of 1812 pension files. So they often hold information like exact birth dates or marriage dates in a time where vital records just were not recorded elsewhere. The full pension files were only 88% complete. They are, as of August 2025, I think they are up through the letter T. They're doing them alphabetically. So even though the pension files are not complete yet, the application index is 100% complete. So if you are not sure if your person should show up in there, you can go look in the index and they will be included in there if they do have a War of 1812 pension. If you're looking for Revolutionary War and other military records, the best bet is to look through that Family Search wiki page for military records and see the links that way to understand what is available and where. One more detail that was discovered by my friend and colleague Alec Ferretti, who you may know from his work at Reclaim the Records, is about Veterans Affairs medical records. So you can obtain VA records through the Freedom of Information Act, and this would be for any 20th century armed forces service who may have used the VA. So there is an index that you can search for free, burls.org. So it's Beneficiary Identification Records Locator Subsystem. So you can go out there and search for a name, and then if your person shows up in there, you can request their VA record through the Freedom of Information Act. There is a Legacy Tree webinar about this. If you go out, if you're a member, and you look for Alec Ferretti, you can find the whole webinar he did about this excellent resource. And I recommend you order these soon, as they may end up being tougher to obtain. We will talk a little bit about research beyond the US and how to get records. I'm going to talk briefly about the records you need to get in the US before you can move on to other countries as well. Obviously, this is not going to apply to every single person, but in general, the first wave of immigration was through 1830, and it was for England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Second wave was like 1830 to 1880, more people from Ireland, Germany, and Scandinavia. Third wave through 1924, Eastern Europe and Italy. Fourth wave everywhere through now. There were a lot of different reasons why people came. There was a lot of chain migration because people would come and find land here, and then they would write home, and then more people would come. They settled together. There were advertisements in newspapers. There was the Homestead Act of 1862. People would come here because they could get free or cheap land. There are a lot of different push and pull factors to consider, and the timeline is also important to consider. Very common misconception is that you can always find a passenger list for your immigrant ancestor, even if they came in like 1770. You may not be able to trace somebody back to their point of origin if they are from long enough ago that there are not immigration or naturalization documents or any type of passenger lists for them. People typically purchased their passage the entire way from their home to their destination. Like if somebody was leaving Norway, they would typically have seen an advertisement and purchased from the company, the immigration line, their fare from Oslo to like Copenhagen, then up to Hull, England, across by train to Liverpool, and then maybe on to Montreal. So it would have been a package price, not just individual legs that they would purchase. There are a lot of departure lists that you can look for in other countries, and some have been destroyed. Prior to 1820, you're unlikely to find passenger lists for your immigrant ancestor because it wasn't even until 1820 that the Steerage Act was passed, stating that ships needed to register if they were coming or going from ports. So prior to that, even ships didn't need to register. Until 1850, there were very few passenger lists. Starting in 1850 to 1870, there are more and more that are still surviving and that you can find. But I would say from 1880 to 1930, you can reasonably expect to find one for your immigrant ancestor. Pay attention to departure lists or emigration lists from somebody's home port. Once you know the name of a ship that somebody came on, look it up online because you may find images and copies of those advertisements that your ancestor may have seen. Be open-minded about other ports. Not everybody came through New York and not everybody came through Ellis Island because Ellis Island didn't even open until 1892. Sometimes you can find information in newspapers about ship arrivals, and sometimes you can even find contemporary diaries, not kept by your ancestor, but they would document the conditions on board for the right passage and for the right time period. Naturalization documents will differ based on time and place. So I find that Family Search full text search is usually my go-to for immigration records, for naturalization records. Up until 1850-ish, naturalization records will only be found in like county court books. There might just be a line item that Johann Schwartz petitioned to become a U.S. citizen. It might have details about his arrival and it might not. 1850 to 1870 is when those pre-printed forms start to emerge, but they are kept at the county level and created at the county level. So they are not standardized. They will have different amounts of information on them. They will not all tell you exactly where somebody came from. When you're looking for records 1850 to 1870, also look for declarations of intentions to become a citizen. Those are also called first papers. People needed to declare first before they could become naturalized later. From 1880 to 1906, I would say you can reasonably expect to find naturalization documents at the county level. After 1906, it became a federal process with standardized forms, so no longer the responsibility of the county. Sometimes the very early ones will be highly detailed, and sometimes they'll just be one line item in the book. This is one of my favorites from 1819, and it says, personally appeared in open court John Smith and made oath that he was born in the county of Corran in Ireland in Europe sometime in the year 1780, as he believes that he arrived at Sackett's Harbor in the state of New York about the 20th August 1819 with his child Anne, aged about 6 weeks, born in Montreal in the province of Lower Canada. So this is amazing. It's very rare to find something like this, but I hope you find this for one of your ancestors. In the mid 1800s, you started to get these pre-printed forms. So this one is from 1873 with just a little bit of detail, not as much as you would hope to see. But about 1860 forward, always looked for a pre-printed declaration of intention as well. Sometimes it will list the ship that somebody came on, the port they arrived in, and the date with varying levels of accuracy. These federal forms after 1906 will all be standardized, and they may also contain name change info as it kind of became more popular to legalize the process of a name change. There are a lot of these on Ancestry and a lot on Family Search full text search. For example, here Friedrich Dornhakel has on here that he would like to change his name to Fred Dorn. There are more immigration documents available through the USCIS that you can request through Freedom of Information Act as well. This is Andre the Giant here. If you had somebody that immigrated more recently, then you might be able to find one of these documents for them too. So go out to the Family Search Wiki link in the handout and it will take you to the USCIS genealogy page. So part of the problem in getting your ancestor back to their place of birth is the way that their name may evolve through time if they come from a different language. So I thought it might be helpful to walk through the steps I took on a recent client case for Nancy Drago. She was born in about the 1860s in Sicily and died in the 1940s in Los Angeles. So keep in mind, I had no record when I started of where Nancy identified her own maiden name. I only had her married name of Drago and her non-Italian first name of Nancy. On the 1910 census in Los Angeles, she was also still listed as Nancy. So then I found them on their first U.S. Census record in Texas in 1900 because when they immigrated from Sicily, they came in through Texas. So her name is listed here on the 1900 census as Laukona Drago. So all online trees put this as her birth name, as that's not a female Italian name, but they still put that as her first name. No online trees had found her birth name or parent name because they all believed that this was her first name. I did not, because I am a skeptical little stinker. So I went looking for her obituary. Always look for those because nobody else had found it because they were all looking for Nancy Drago, and this says Vincenza, not Nancy. So names evolve. She may have been Nancy to English speakers, but obviously her family spoke Italian. It had no details on her origins, but now I did feel confident that she really was Vincenza and not Lauyacona or whatever was the other name that had been listed for her first name. So I followed the records for all of her children, looking for maybe a delayed birth certificate for one of them for when they needed to apply for Social Security, maybe marriage certificates where they had to list their mother's maiden name, death certificates if an informant potentially knew their mother's maiden name. I did find this delayed birth certificate where it said that her name was Vincenza Leago and that her birthplace was Alia, province of Palermo in Sicily. So I wanted to follow this and see if I could find additional information based on this name and the location of Aaliyah. Note on Ancestry, I just searched on the surname Leago and on Palermo. Soundex will pull in similar names, so it'll be sound-alike names, even if the spelling's a little bit different. It came out with Leggio, Lago, and Liga, but nobody had any birth or marriage records for Vincenza of the right age in the right place. Then I went out to the Family Search catalog for Aaliyah, Palermo, Sicily. These are image-only records still at this point. They're not searchable by name or in full text search because at this point, Italian has not been added as a language that is available in full text. So you page through these records just like you're reading a book. I pulled up the vital records and I just started looking in the index pages under the letter L. There were a lot of people in that location for the name Lo Iacono. Lo Iacono sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think when Vincenzo was asked by the census enumerator what his wife's name was on that 1900 U.S. federal census, he gave her maiden name. Instead of Vincenza, he just said her name was Leocona. Since I had followed all of those details, I now recognized their marriage record when I finally found it. Vincenzo Drago and Vincenza Lo Iacono are married here in this record. Had I just been looking for Nancy Leago, I don't think I would have realized that it was them. I had to lay the framework and work inch by inch back to the point of origin. These documents in other languages can be really intimidating, but you can read them. So I've got this Sicilian marriage record pulled up, and even the numbers are written out as Italian words. Since this is a pre-printed form, you really only need to pay attention to what is handwritten and just do it section by section to make sense of the information you need in these records. There are loads of genealogy record reading aids available online. Many of them are on Family Search in the wiki area, but a lot of them you can find just by Googling it. Just Google like Italian marriage record genealogy reading aid, and then it might come up with something like this. This took me straight to an easy to follow example with a translation. These documents are written in boilerplate language, meaning that every single record may be really long, but nearly all of the information listed in it is identical in each entry. And you just need to figure out the parts that are relevant to your family. Compare the words in the reading aid to the form that you have. Go section by section, comparing the example and the translation to the original. And then write down all of the details as you uncover them. Maybe you need to print it out and just do it in red pen right on there, whatever works best for you to decipher it. Use genealogy word lists in Google Translate to figure out the terms that are being used. Both Ancestry and Family Search have a lot of genealogy word lists too. The best way to find them is to just Google something like Swedish occupations genealogy or Norwegian genealogy cause of death. That will help you get relevant word lists and not just general word lists. Script generators can be helpful as well, and I've included 2 of them in your handout. If you are looking at old German records that you can't read that are written in current schrift, then you can at least put names or places in so that you can train your eye to look for those words and see the patterns in how they are written. This website is German language based, but you don't really need to read German. You can just enter the name you're looking for in text, like Katarina here, and then right above the box where your results show up, it's going to show you 8 different types of German scripts, and you can just toggle between each of them to see what it looks like and see what most closely matches the record you're trying to decipher. When you are dealing with Cyrillic records, it is a little bit tougher. This is a decent transliterator that you can find to get a word from the Latin or Roman alphabet to Cyrillic. But very few of your records will be printed in Cyrillic. They will be written in cursive handwriting. So like here, I type in Vladimir, and then it shows it to me in Cyrillic script. Then I can copy Vladimir written in Cyrillic and I can paste it into this script generator. And then it's going to show me what it looks like, kind of, with breaks between the letters in Russian cursive to help me figure out how to recognize the right names in the records. Google Translate also has a free app that I use to easily translate typed text when I'm researching. It doesn't work very well on cursive and handwriting, but it does work through your phone's camera, and then it kind of overlays the translation onto your phone's screen. So while it might not be helpful for reading everything in an entry, it's going to help you with those column headers. Try Googling in another language with the correct letters used in that language. Like here in this example, let's say my family came from the Norwegian farm of Fjoljabuenget. Now, if I just type into Google the way I would write that in English without the O with the line through it, you can see that really nothing much comes up in Google. But if I copy the place name from a map and then paste it into Google, that's going to tell Google to give me results in Norwegian. And I'm far more likely to find things relative to my genealogy research that way. And finally, let's talk about Family Search Places. It is a free site to use through familysearch.org, and it's going to give you a timeline for different locations along with different names and jurisdictions that location has had throughout history and different empires. So let's say your family lived in Grunov and it was part of Prussia and they spoke German. Those records are now going to be in Polish archives because that is now modern day Poland. The records often stayed in the same location where they've always been most of the time. So Family Search Places will show you this timeline and then help you identify any modern names of a town from previous empires. Go to my website to check out any remaining dates for my live online classes. I will not be offering those in 2026. And then check my website for research guides, many more to come. Follow me on social media for daily genealogy tip videos and other genealogy news and events. And thanks for watching.